Our speaker tonight is Dr. Michael Bradley.
Later.
Gilda Ross puts all this together.
I could talk about Dr. Michael Bradley for a very, very long time, but I wouldn't want to take the time away. He just didn't want me to mention his prison record, so I won't. Let me just say this one thing that I think says a lot about who Dr. Bradley is. We've done this for 15 years, and never before, ever, and we've had some great speakers, never before have we brought a speaker back by popular demand 1 year after they come to Glenbard. So please feel good about that, okay? And thank you so much on this very busy time of year and a cloudy, cold night. Thanks for coming out, everybody. Appreciate it. Dr. Michael Bradley.
I think I'll start off after that great welcome by disappointing you from the get-go. Before I disappoint you though, I got to see who you guys are in terms of what we used to say in the Army service stripes, how much of this parenting thing you've done. Can I get a show of hands? Who here has their eldest child 25 or over? A lot of child brides in the audience, very good, okay. 18 to 25, oldest child, okay. 13, 18, oldest child. Okay, oldest child 13 below. Oh. Gilda, we were supposed to screen these folks out. Well, you guys want to tell them, or should I tell them? Or, I mean, if someone to leave, it's okay, I understand. Okay, well, you see, the bad message there is that raising kids up to adolescence is pretty much like the regular season in baseball. You all know the regular season in baseball? There's like 1 million games, It's like, what inning is it, honey? I'm not sure. What's the score? I don't know. You want to get some ice cream? Sure. It's laid back, it's easy, not a lot of stress. And when you hit adolescence, suddenly you hit the playoffs. Everything gets bigger, faster, and smarter. The game changes drastically. It's very different than raising a kid up to adolescence. And I'm telling you that to remind you veteran parents and to kind of warn you younger parents about that parent karma thing you got to be very careful of. See, there's always this moment, because you're raising your kid up to 9, 10, 11, things are great, you guys are really tight, it's, hey, this is so easy, And you have this karma moment where you're looking out your window, and there's your next door neighbor on the front lawn with her 15-year-old daughter who is shrieking at her and calling your neighbor every bad name you've ever heard and a few you never heard before. And there's a thing that a lot of us novices did, I don't want you younger parents to do, and that is don't judge. Because what goes through our heads very often is, oh, I'd never let my daughter talk to me like that. Don't go there, don't do that. Light a candle, say a prayer, whatever you do not judge. Because until you've walked in those shoes, you really don't know what it's like. Second point of bad news. I'm not here to help you with the reason you came here tonight. So you're here for the same reason I go to all the shrink barbecues and shrink parties and corner the latest grade shrink who was on Oprah. And I said, listen, would you mind if I asked you a question? Not about my kid, of course, but I was wondering what you would do if your kid was blah, blah, blah. We all want to know how to control our kids, right? Can we just admit that? Because if our kids would just do what the hell we tell them to do, there wouldn't be a problem. You wouldn't be here. You could be home watching the Phillies beat up on the Yankees or something, But instead, we go to these things because a lot of times we're driven by our need for control with our kids. My disappointment for you is I'm not here to help you control your child. Sorry. I hold that that's a mission statement for past generations of parents, and it sort of worked. We'll chat about that. But I hold that today we cannot afford to have that mission statement because the world has changed around our children. I hold today that our mission must rather be how do we teach our children to control themselves. Now, is that parsing a couple of words? Yes, and it's an entirely different way of doing this thing called parenting. Different set of tactics and strategies, different set of risk assessments, a whole different game plan. Now, I'm going to try to convince you of that because I believe that we have no other choice. given the world around our kids. The old mission statement doesn't work. It's like fighting the new war with the lessons from the last one. You have to adapt. You have to figure out what the new terrain is and what the new challenge is. I'm going to try to convince you of that viewpoint in 4 parts. First, we're going to talk about the brains inside of your teenagers' heads. Yes, there is a brain there. No, it is not the brain you had hoped. In fact, every 8 weeks or so, we get another piece of research that tells us that teen brains have very specific challenges. They don't work so good. And this is relatively new information. I think you'll find that kind of interesting. Second, we're going to talk about the world around these kids. These kids, as you see, have brain challenges, and then we plunk them in the middle of a world that has kind of really gone insane. A world that comes after your child 24/7, no joke, trying to convince him or her to do things that will hurt them terribly. And we're doing this to a degree we've never come after a prior generation of teenagers, thanks to the efficiency of electronics, the computer age, the screen age. We're on new ground here. I think you'll find that part scary when we talk about the numbers, what's happening with our kids statistically. Third, we'll put it all together. What do you do with this stuff? You know, how is this information helpful? We'll come up with some down and dirty strategies, what to do to try to get your kids through this really difficult time. Am I driving this camera person crazy? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take Can you stand still for God's sake? All right, I'll try to roll less. It's an ADHD thing. I'm sorry. Then we're going to talk about how do you use this information in a format that really works out in the field as practical. Finally, we'll get to the best part of the evening, Q&A, your questions and answers. A couple of rules about Q&A. First of all, I am Irish by birth, not by choice. In my family, Q&A stands for quarrels and arguments. So if you disagree with something I'm saying, if you want to raise your hand and say, you know, Bradley, that's the dumbest thing I heard in 30 years, I won't be so homesick. I'll feel like I'm back at the dinner table. Feel free to disagree. Makes for a much better evening. Usually it means I'm not being clear or you've thought of something I haven't thought of. So feel free to disagree at the Q&A. And I promise to get you all out by 9. They're going to shut the lights out by 9. We'll be out of here before it gets done. Second rule about Q&A, contrary to the myth, there is such a thing as a dumb question. I'd love to pause after saying that. That's the question you leave here tonight without getting an answer to. I guarantee if you've got a question, other folks have the same question. It's always that way. Not all of us are brave enough to stand up and ask a question. So please ask those questions. And if we have time, I'll hang around at the end for a bit. And there's also on our website, I think you have the website information, there's something called forums, parent forums. It's like Parents Anonymous, where everything that can go wrong with a teenager, somebody's already asked about and lots of people talk about. Please do the forums. By the way, if we have helpers, you know, shrinks in the audience, please get on there because it's really taken off and we need everybody kind of chiming in with opinions and help. So check that out as well for answers to your questions. Finally, a couple of points of business. Yes, this may be the ugliest tie you've ever seen in your life. Yeah, once again, Gilda, no one was impolite enough to ask, what the heck is that tie? Can anybody see the characters on the tie? Did you? Don't see that? No? Rocky and Bullwinkle. Rocky and Bullwinkle. Yes, of course, it's my heroes. There's a story there. My son Ross is now 18. Back in the day when he was going through the bumpy time, used to like to make fun of me about my clothes. Actually made fun of me about everything. You know, he used to, have you had that kind of stroke thing that happens? You know, I used to, with Ross, I used to be sort of cool. Really, he thought I was funny, thought I was smart, a little athletic, stuff like that. And I lost it all one night, bam! It's like I had a massive stroke, nobody told me. The next day, seriously, the next day I'm dumber than sliced white bread, you know? It's like nothing works. Well, anyway, we started going through the snit back and forth. He would make fun of my clothes. And I would make fun of his clothes, which was easy to do. He was in his Metallica phase, you all know the Metallica phase, black on black on black, and all the metal. It took us like 2 hours to get through the metal detector in the airport. He kept setting it off with something. Well, he grew out of that, by the way. I think since the last time I saw you, probably. So he's gotten older now. He gave that up. Now he graduated into, I guess you'd call it homeless. I'm not kidding about this. Yeah, I dropped them off at the school bus. You know, the kids would get up first. It's dark outside, 20 degrees, 20-mile-an-hour wind, kind of slushy, sleeting outside. And what is Ross wearing in his new look? No joke. Starting at top on the way down. First, he's got a 40-foot muffler that his sort of obsessive girlfriend knitted for him. She didn't know where to stop. He's got a t-shirt with holes in the t-shirt. No coat, of course. That goes without saying. Right? He's got jeans with holes that he tore in there, and he's got the long, you know, the back end is dragging on the ground, scoops up the slush as he walks, which didn't ruin his shoes because on his feet he had beach thumbs. I'm not making this up. He's got his cup of coffee, and I dropped my sincere, and he's huddled on the coffee. I pulled off to the side of the road, to the steamy coffee. I was waiting for the social work ladies to pull up, you know, come on, son, we'll get you inside, you know, code blue. In any event, so he gave me this tie one holiday family gathering as a commentary on my incredible lack of taste in clothing. Right? Big ha-ha, everybody laughed. But don't feel bad for me. I got them back. I wear it everywhere I go. I was on the Today Show, and the interviewer said, "That's some tie, Dr. Brad. Let's give me the camera problem." I said, "Yeah, isn't that cool? My son Ross bought that for me." You can't beat him anymore, so you gotta take your shots where you can. He never gave me another terrible time. All right, and I also gotta apologize in advance for swigging on the water. The voice is a little thin, I'm doing a lot of speaking, but we'll get through the evening. My daughter's statements notwithstanding. My daughter Sarah has no joke, got a little post-traumatic stress stuff. On 9/11, we lost a couple of parents at her school that day, and they thought I was one of them for a while. She heard the teacher saying that Dr. Bradley had died, so you know, she came apart. So she gets really upset whenever I travel. Not too bad now, but still it happens. So I'll probably snuggle her down to sleep before I leave on a trip, because she always gets a little weirded out. And a while ago, I was snuggling her down before a trip, and she turned to me and said, "Daddy, are you going to die soon?" I'm thinking, here we go, post-traumatic stress stuff and all the wars and everything we got going. It really does weird kids out, by the way. In any event, so I said, "Sweetheart, I don't think I'm going to die soon, and I'll do everything I possibly can to try to keep that from happening, okay?" And she said, "Okay, Daddy." And then I had to ask the parent question. I said, "Sarah, why did you ask me that, honey?" And she said, and I quote, "Well, Dad, because just like, look at you." True story. True story. That's where you go find your partner. Tell me what I look like. Tell me the truth. Don't patronize me in the eye. Any event. So, her nasty comments notwithstanding, you want to start with the good news or the bad news? How do you want to do this? The good news? Bad news?
Bad.
Yeah, I'll do the bad news. It's an Irish thing. We love that bad news stuff. In case you haven't noticed, because you're going to need the good news after the bad. Your kid's brain doesn't work so good in early adolescence. They actually lose skills they had before they hit the early teen years. Things bumble along great, and just really tight, you're doing great, and suddenly there's this shift. What you're looking at is the brain renovating itself. It goes through this explosion of its actually most sophisticated development of the life is in early adolescence. We didn't know about this till 10, 15 years ago, and we're still learning it out, still figuring it out in terms of all the implications. But it's very dramatic. It's kind of like renovating your house or your kitchen even. Have you done that? Was that a fun experience? Yeah, we did that. We just finished. The contractor 3 years ago said, we'll be done in 3 months tops. We just finished. That was 3 years ago. And it's just unbelievable. Everybody gets on edge and nothing works. Switches don't operate the thing it's supposed to operate. That's what goes on inside teenagers' brains in early adolescence. It starts with girls earlier than boys. Typically it starts with girls like 11 sometimes, 12, 13. Boys about 18 months, 24 months after that. Which, by the way, raises a couple of interesting questions. Which do you think are harder to raise, girls or boys, would you say? Girls! Don't be shy now. Yeah, right, a lot of passion there. Well, we actually researched that. We interviewed parents who raised both, and they said, well, it's one dad in particular I recall. He said, well, let's see, when my son was 15, he was a maniac at times. He'd scream and yell and punch the hole in the wall. And then our daughter turned 15, and boy, do we miss our son. Why is that? Girls are smarter. They're, socially, emotionally, they're really, really good at reading cues and moving adults around. And by the way, mothers and daughters, I know that's why so many moms are here tonight. They got that pained look. I can see the tear stains. I don't mean to make fun of it. The mothers and daughters, most powerful relationship on the face of the planet, for better and for worse. Ultimately, you will be closer with your daughter than probably any other alignment in the family. However, during the teen years, it can get really, really crazy. Mothers and daughters. I see it happening now with Sarah, my little angel, 12 years old, and my wife is an incredibly smart and tenacious and calm and disciplined woman. And they're fighting over how to operate the food processor in the kitchen. And it's like, who's in charge of the kitchen? And the men are all backing out like, bar fight. And it just spirals up. It's incredible. I had a mother interview me and she said, listen, I have a question before we begin treatment here. I need to know what your philosophy is on medications. Not for my daughter, for me. Because if you don't give me drugs, I'm going to kill her. More than once I've had that conversation. The girls start down the path ahead of the boys, and they typically are different. The boys will usually have these explosions. Occasionally it's a volcano goes off, screaming and yelling, King Kong. And typically, half hour later, girls, you cross them, they'll give you a look, and they go underground. It's kind of like Al-Qaeda. They'll organize, they'll get the neighbors against you, your spouse, Daddy, what mommy said to me? Put your mother on the phone, sweetheart. I can't believe it. Seriously, they're really good at doing this stuff. They just make moms just berserk. Just berserk, screaming at their husbands. Can't you see she's manipulating her? No, I can't. I'm a guy. By the way, ladies, that girls are 2 years ahead of the boys. Does that explain something else to you that you may have run into already? Or you experienced? Do you remember being in 6th grade and you were in a co-ed classroom? You remember looking around the boys versus the girls? Did that ever hit you? And you're looking at the girls, and what are they doing? 6th grade, they're like listening and taking notes and answering questions. And what are the boys doing in 6th grade classrooms? Yeah, making rude noises, fighting, look at it, throwing stuff, telling puke jokes. And you remember the sinking feeling you had that you had to pick a mate out of that gene pool? 6th grade boys weren't looking so good. So what did you do? You checked out the 8th grade boys, right? Everybody always wonders, why do girls chase the older boys? Because when you put the brain scans up, that 8th grade boy is more on the level of the 6th grade girl. It just lines right up. Sorry. It's Mother Nature's fault, not mine. Okay, so how do you know this is happening? What are the tip-offs that you're starting down this path? The first is your kids can get a tad moody, particularly the girls. And there's a seminal moment, I've heard it a million times. Your daughter, everything's fine one night, and the next day she's standing in front of your cupboard, usually 11 or 12, and there's $7,000 worth of food in the cupboard, and she says, there's nothing to eat. And you say, of course there's something to eat. No, there's not. There's nothing in here that I like. You never get anything I like. Well, honey, there's tuna fish. I don't kill living creatures to survive. Well, you did last night. I'm a vegan now. I don't do that. Well, honey, there's pasta. You like pasta. You want to get me fat. I know what you want to do. You hate me. You want me to get fat. I hate you. I hate my life. Ah! Bang goes the door. We used to say it was hormones, part of the menstrual stuff. It's not. It's more neurochemical changes in the brains, where the brain the chemicals that help us regulate our moods and so forth go up and down and up and down. And that's why we see these incredible peaks and valleys with moods. Second, they become a tad impulsive. Yeah, a tad impulsive. They say and do things that astound them even more than you. they'll act like they meant to do this. They feel like cats, you know, they can't make a mistake. They, oh, I meant to fall off the balcony like that. But in fact, they don't. They really don't understand. What happens is they lose the biochemical brakes in the brain. See, you guys are lucky enough to have this development. The prefrontal cortex up here is really what gets wired in adolescence. What does that do? It's kind of like the smart part of your head. When you're driving home tonight, some jerk cuts you off, and he's throwing you the finger and all that kind of stuff, and you want to fight him, right? You're going to get out and have a fist fight. Well, I guess the females don't understand this. If women knew how to drive, you want to have fist fights over somebody cutting you off. No, seriously, you get out. And what happens is the male part of the animal part of the brain fires off. It gets really angry. So you want to do something, you want to strike back, you're really, really angry. And that impulse runs up to the front part of the brain, and the front part of the brain says, wait a minute, do you really want to do this? You've probably got a gun. You want to die over 10 feet of asphalt. What are you going to do, have a fist fight, you know, on the highway? You're a little old for that. Just let it go. Oh, let it go. Well, kids get these impulses, and they don't have the prefrontal that they get through. It's bang, zoom in early adolescence. So they'll do and say things they don't really intend to do. When you drag him into my office and say he's crazy, fix him, he'll tell me, you know, don't tell my mom, but, you know, I can't believe I said that to her or did that thing. I don't do that stuff. I don't know why I did it. They are as scared as everybody else about the way the brains are working. Next, and you've seen this probably, their ability to process emotion gets a number of points of deficit all of a sudden. First, the speed at which they can have powerful discussions slows down. When you're having an emotional discussion, an intense discussion with them, they just have a hard time processing it. You can see in their eyes. They used to be able to do it better. Their speed at which they process emotions slows up 20, sometimes 25%. It's like they had a stroke and they can't function the way they used to. That's where you have the conversation with, hello, Earth to child, anybody in there? You know, and he gets mad, stomps away because he can't respond. He's struggling. His brain is kind of slowing down like a computer with a virus. Next point of emotional processing, they misinterpret adult expressions of fear and concern. In other words, you're afraid for them, you're concerned for them. They hear those statements as anger and criticism. Exactly. Exactly. That's when they say, stop yelling at me. You're always yelling at me. You say, honey, I wasn't yelling. I was just really scared that you climbed out the window at 3 a.m. to meet some guy you met on the internet 5 minutes before. I think it's a bad idea. Don't you know how crazy it is out there? Yes, you are. You're yelling right now. She storms off. Have you had the kid come home, middle school kid, early high school, telling you how the teacher is always yelling at him? She yells at me all the time. She's always yelling at me. So you hear this about 50 times. You said, you know, I've had it. You know, don't want any abusive teachers. With my kids, you go to confront this teacher, and you go into the classroom, and there's this kind of small, mousy, nice woman, and say, well, Miss Jones, I really don't yell. I did ask him to do his homework. That's true. They misinterpret those statements as anger and criticism of them. So what do? Apologize. Apologize. Have you ever tried arguing with them as to whether you were yelling or not? Did that work out so good? Yes, you were. No, I wasn't. Yes, you were. No, I wasn't. Yes, you were. No. The thing to do is to say, oh, I'm sorry, honey. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I apologize. How can I express this in a way that doesn't get you upset? So just apologize. Just apologize. Have no pride and apologize for things you never did. You'll get through this really well. The next point, the most important point to remember, because this will tie in later when we try to put it all together, if you stress a teen brain, it cannot learn. How can you stress a teen brain? Well, you can stress it by yelling at it. You don't even have to yell, you can be sarcastic. It's a personal favorite of mine, comes natural to the Irish people. You can beat them up, you can smack them around. It turns out that words can do more damage than hitting kids. How about that piece of research? Yeah, how about that piece of research? We can do more damage with our spoken words than with our clenched fists. And another way you can stress that brain is to cry, is to lose control, say, this is really important, you could have died. That's all stress. What happens is you fire up the animal center of their brain, whatever learning centers are there, shut down. They may react to what you're doing. They're getting ready to run away or fight, but they can't think. They can't absorb what it is you're trying to say. And teaching teenagers turns out to be the best way to keep them safe. So if you want to teach them something, you can't stress their brains. Remember that for later. As you also notice that they don't go to bed or sleep when the rest of the world does, because they love to party, right? No, they actually can't sleep. Mother Nature pushes their sleep clock hours into the night. And which are the first group of kids that we get up in the morning to go to school? Adolescents. Do you know how many hours of sleep your teenager is supposed to be getting every night? Actually, 10. Some experts say 11. Somewhere in there, 10, 11. 10.7 hours is the number they boiled out and came up with. Do you know how many hours of sleep the average American teenager is getting? Yeah, it's like 5.7, 5 to 6, somewhere in there. Just think about that one number, guys. If I cut your sleep in half for a few months, how would you be? Would you be a little ADHD? A little depressed, a little reactive? Anybody, don't raise your hands because I feel too sorry for you and you bring back horrible memories, but newborns. I remember newborns in a house. God, I remember my eyes hurt. You know? Seriously, my eyeballs ached from not having any sleep. It was so painful. And I remember the fog. Is that you, honey? Is that my wife there? You know? Yes, seriously. So think about what we do to teenagers. If I was king of the world, first thing I would do is say teenagers get to sleep the way Mother Nature built them, like 10 hours a night. Some school districts actually flip the schedules around to bring the teenagers in last. Guess what happened? Attendance rates shot up. Discipline problems fell down like 30%, an amazing number. And achievement levels went up like 20, 25% by giving them an extra hour, hour and a half of sleep. Why don't we do that? Football, because everybody has to be on the same schedule, all the sports. Daycare. Teenagers often are providing daycare to the younger kids when they come home because everybody's working, at least one job. And sometimes the teenagers are working themselves to save for college. So we put them in this bind where they don't have enough sleep. A lot of kids, we get off or we lower their medications by just changing their lifestyle. But nobody wants to hear that. Parents come in, they're convinced their kid is ADHD, and the kid's convinced he's ADHD, and we do a history, and I say, look, before we talk about powerful medicines, how about if we try working on the sleep, working on the diet a little bit, with proper nutrition, and maybe, God forbid, take a walk around the block once in a while, a little exercise, and how about if we see what happens, and the parents glaze over, and I know I'll never see them again. They're going to say, oh, thank you very much, they never come back, they find somebody else to write the script. So, and we're medicating kids for lack of sleep very often when we think it's other sorts of diseases. So, second piece of bad news. The world around our kids is truly insane. And this is where we get a little depressing. I'll get through as quickly as I can, but you need to know what's out there. Long story short, what's happened is we are saturating their environment with prompts, P-R-O-M-P-T-S, or suggestions for them to do things that will hurt them terribly. And we're doing this in ways we've never done before. We barrage them with these suggestions. They're lyrics in a song, they're scenes in movies, in videos, in the video games. It's in the IMs they do. It's on the Facebooks and YouTubes. It's a gazillion prompts to act out with drugs and sex and violence. We've never ever done this to a prior generation of teenagers. We didn't have the technology. So that's how we're on this kind of new turf, and nobody knows where it's going. And the initial numbers are pretty scary. Question, do prompts change behavior? I used to say no, and I was wrong. I didn't think they could be that powerful. It just didn't make sense to me. However, it turns out they are. One stunning example is the American Medical Association did a study about 18 months ago now to find out why kids start smoking cigarettes, smoking initiation. You know the way to get your kid to start smoking cigarettes is not, as we used to think, parents are smoking, peers are smoking, socioeconomic class, that kind of stuff. It's showing him lots of on-screen smoking. It's that simple. Kids who saw lots of on-screen smoking had 3 times, 300% increase in smoking initiation over kids who saw little on-screen smoking. Just a crazy number. We also see it with girls that get involved in abusive sexual behaviors that often, almost always, that's linked with their exposure to sexualized lyrics that are also involved in degradation of women. They listen to this stuff, guys, they drink it in, their brains are soft, and they act it out. So the culture is really coming after the kids with all of these messages. What is it doing statistically? Well, it's a little scary. First of all, there's 2 changes that have occurred. One is kids have never been doing these risk behaviors in the numbers they're doing them now. They've never been higher than they are now. They're at all-time high levels. Some of you are saying, wait a minute, I read some stuff in the newspaper, federal government is saying that some risk behaviors are coming down. No, they're not. They are not. What's changed is that our data are no longer valid. You know how we got those data? There's self-report inventories. You've probably seen these things. We hand them out to kids, and no joke, it sounds funny every time I say it, but we say, would you mind filling out this form and telling us if you're doing any drugs or sex or violence? That's what we do. Just think about that for a minute. You know, if I hand out a form to you guys, say, I'm just doing some research. I promise not to tell anybody. You don't trust me. Have you ever cheated on your income taxes? Have you ever done any drugs, cheated on your spouse? You know, it's all confidential. You know, you're going to fill it out accurately? Well, the kids now, because they live in a technology age, do not fill these things out accurately. One of my colleagues back home did some research and found out that kids underestimate these behaviors by about 30%. Another statistic, the federal government is telling us through the self-report inventories that drug use has leveled off and decreased in some instances. Well, in the same 10 years where they're telling me that drug use has decreased, the body count in hospitals, deaths by overdose, have increased threefold. Threefold. So some of these numbers are off. You know, do you trust the hospital counts or do you trust kids filling out these forms? With part of my friend's research, I interviewed a kid and I got his form. He was an altar boy. He never did anything wrong, according to his report. I said, would you mind telling me, you know, did you fill this out accurately? And he smiled and he said, what do you think? I said, well, I don't know. I'm just asking the question. And he said, why would anybody fill that out accurately? And I said, well, it's confidential. And he points to the ceiling, you know, one of these little round things. And he said, what about that? And I said, what do you mean? What is that, a fire detector? He said, no, man, that's a camera. We're being recorded right now as the kids are filling out these sheets. You know, have I done any drug, sex, or violence? So the numbers are no longer trustworthy. What is going on in terms of actual behaviors? Well, first we'll talk about drugs. And the first drug we need to talk about is the deadliest drug. What is the deadliest drug out there for your kid? Alcohol. Alcohol kills more of our children than all the other drugs combined. Alcohol. But we typically don't think that alcohol is a drug. It's not really a drug, is it, Dr. Bradley? Oh, yes, it is. It is not a drug, it is the drug. See, we get weird about alcohol because most of us do alcohol. We don't like to think of it as a drug. In fact, it's a terribly neurotoxic, addictive substance. It's one of the worst drugs you could pick to do. But we do that. It's time-honored. It's traditional. It's American. It's football, baseball. I drink, dealing with some of these numbers we're going to go into. When I go home at night, I like to get my glass of Merlot, my red wine, for my cardiovascular system, of course, right? Any researchers here? Actually, I don't want you to answer that because I don't want to. I didn't even read the literature. I just read the headline. You know? I know that's true, you know, because I feel so much better after my glass of Merlot. Honey, would you get me another glass of Health, the Shiraz? But Ross, for years, you know, would stare at me saying, "Sure, the old man can do his Merlot," but if Ross walked in and lit up a joint, he'd go crazy. Which I would. What's up with that? It's a double standard. But in fact, kids cannot do drugs, especially alcohol. Why? Because we have lots of literature. For years we've had this number that kids start doing drugs At age 14, they have 5 times the rate of addiction than somebody who waits till they're 21 to use any drug. 5 times. Everybody got that one? 5 times. Why is that? Their brains are soft. They don't defend themselves against the neurotoxic addictive effects of alcohol. Another speaker you guys ought to get in is Ron Dahl from Duke University. They've got all the information. They got brain scans that are just, will make you want to throw your wine away, especially if your kid is around, because of what it does to teen brains. When somebody gets to be 21, their brain is defended more against the neurotoxic effects. It's hard to create an addict out of somebody who's 21 who hasn't used. It really happens once in a while. It's very rare. Easy to create an addict with a teenager starting at age 14. Well, I'm not beating you up about this because you and I are the pushers. Because we do alcohol, we have a lax response when our kids are drinking. It's like, well, it's just alcohol, I drank some. The other thing that's changed is the degree, the concentration of the drinking is exponentially higher than when you were a teenager, more than likely. And they're doing it at younger and younger ages. And that's how we are whacking these kids so dramatically that if you come to this high school tomorrow and count off every 10th child, you'll have a child that has a serious problem with alcohol. They are becoming alcohol dependent. They are on the measurable spectrum, meaning they live their lives around drinking. They set things up, they pay terrible prices intellectually, academically, socially, emotionally, familially, in terms of what's happening in their family. They love the stuff and they cannot really stop. If that scares you, go to a college campus. Every 4th kid, 23.5% college freshmen are alcohol dependent. Every 4th kid. It's part of the reason so many of them just crash and burn and they're not there for the sophomore year. We're losing in record numbers. And college presidents have the audacity to write a paper saying the problem is the drinking age is too high. We should roll the drinking age back to 18. That is an outrage. What are they doing? They can't control the problem. They don't want to get sued. So the answer is, well, let's boot it back a little bit. We've tried that at times. And the resulting explosion in alcohol use and misuse in younger and younger teens has been phenomenal. Guys, it's a big problem. I'm beating you up because as parents, we often provide the booze to the kids. And maybe you don't. I'm sure you don't. This is almost always required. But you can have good friends that are doing this. They set up the cakes in the basement for teenagers. Back home, I do psychological postmortems. I'm on a committee. When we lose a teen, we get the disk drive and interview the friends and the family if they're willing. Try to figure out how we don't lose the next kid. Guys, alcohol is involved in virtually every teen death. Every bad thing that happens to kids. In suicide, drinking and driving, just overdosing, and sexual assault, rape, sexually transmitted diseases, alcohol pops up all over the place. So we interview the parents. Why were you giving the kids alcohol, if you don't mind my asking? Oh, we didn't want them doing drugs, so we made a deal. He promised he wouldn't do drugs if we let him drink. Really? Interesting. We didn't want them drinking and driving, so we kept them in our basement. Really? Interesting. We wanted him to learn how to drink. We were teaching him how to drink so he'd be more responsible. You know, like the European kids, where they let them drink at young ages, and those kids don't have any problem with alcohol, right? Wrong. That's the biggest bunch of hooey that's hit the shores in a very long time. If you go onto my website, get this, I think it's either the last newsletter or second to the last, I have all the numbers laid out there. When we actually did a comparative study, cultures that let kids drink when they're young have alcohol problems that make ours look like nothing, as bad as they are. Just read the numbers. It's stunning. What's the bottom line? Your kid can't drink, guys. They cannot drink. You have to pick zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. Is your kid going to drink anyway? Yes. Sorry. But don't make that mistake of saying 1 beer is okay. Because if 1 is okay, what about 2? What about 4? How about 16? Kids don't drink, just have a couple of beers. They now run shots. They drink to get drunk. They actually videotape themselves and put it on their Facebooks and such. Passed out, heads in toilets, vomiting all over. It's like a badge of courage. So it has just kind of taken off. You have to start the discussion with other parents. Okay? Briefly, marijuana and pills are now tied for second place. Is marijuana addictive? Yes. Is marijuana addictive? Yes. Which is interesting because now we're on the cusp of certainly decriminalizing and likely legalizing marijuana. That's based on 20-year-old research. The marijuana that kids are doing now is 3 to 9 times as potent. And we now have this other tsunami coming of kids that are marijuana addicted. There is a physical addiction that can occur, but that's not the biggie. It's actually a psychological addiction. They can't tolerate stress. They've got a big test coming up, they want to try out for the swim team, their stomach was in a knot, they smoke it away. And then, because they can't tolerate stress, they end up in your basement at age 35 and 40, playing video games and smoking dope. So we've got this whole subculture, these kids that cannot stop using weed, guys, because they're psychologically addicted. So be very careful about being tolerant of those non-serious drugs. I used to do rehab work, and we had a kid only doing marijuana. We used to congratulate ourselves. And we get him off heroin or cocaine, he's only doing weed. Those days are over. Okay, finally, sex. Are our kids having lots of sex? Yes. Are they having safe sex? No. The sex education stuff, it's important, it doesn't work. It's by no means a guarantee. First of all, a majority of 9th grade females are now sexually active. As of this year, we have more male virgins in 12th grade than female virgins in 12th grade. What's happening? It turns out that the whole sexual dynamic is shifted. Guess who the sexual predators are in middle school these days? The girls. You want me to repeat that one? The girls are approaching the boys for casual sex, saying, hey, no relationship, right? No demands, just, party sex, have fun. In middle school, ages 12 and 13, the girls are initiating these behaviors. This is a huge shift. My wife was a researcher who did research on male sexual behavior years ago. She came up with a term to describe how men are sexually. She said that men are pig dogs. No, it's a joke. That was my interpretation. She uses a lot of big words. I said, honey, these 3 pages, just call them pig dogs. Everybody knows what we're talking about. I'm such a help to her. She's so happy she's got me. In any event, pig dogs. Men are visual, physical sexual creatures. Men, I'm sorry ladies, can have casual sex, morals, ethics, and so forth aside. There's very little, if any, psychological damage. It just doesn't happen. Question, can women do that? Answer, no. Most experts say women are emotional sexual creatures. For proper sexual function, women need feelings of exclusivity, of infidelity, cherishing, future planning, blah, blah, blah. I did not mean to say blah, blah, blah. I do that every time. Note to self. Blah, blah. Women have much higher sexual values, right guys, that we should all aspire to. Does that work out? Okay. Yeah, we're different. Girls are now attempting to rewrite that. They're actually attempting to act like boys. And when we track these girls who have this, we used to call it promiscuous behavior, we need another word. For example, 25% of 9th grade students, females, had 4 or more sex partners in the preceding 30 days. I want to run that number again. It's like exploded, just exploded. One of the stunning numbers, nobody believed that, so we got confirmatory evidence. We used to ask kids, do you have an STD? That was a smart thing. Well, a researcher from the CDC finally drew blood. Did you see that study? It was just about 8 months ago. She actually went in, randomized study, very well done. City kids, suburban kids, private school, public school, took blood and tested it. Guess what? Every 4th girl came up with an active STD. That test did not test. The study did not look at syphilis and gonorrhea because they were really looking at other sorts of STDs. It was a sideways finding. They didn't expect these numbers at all. If you roll in syphilis and gonorrhea, and it's probably every 3rd girl walking down the hall has an active sexually transmitted disease. These are all kids, everywhere. The girls had no idea, which raises the question, what about the sex ed stuff? Do they get sex ed? Most do. Sex ed information goes here, along with like history, facts, algebra, formulas. The behaviors, the impulse is back here, the heat of the moment stuff. Kids, especially when they're younger, don't have the wires that connect the two things. They're not able to retrieve the data and say, this is probably a bad idea, I ought to think about this. They don't do that. Remember I said they're impulsive? Bang, zoom. So that's what's happening with them sexually. When we track these girls into young adulthood, because a lot of us are saying, well, maybe this is just cultural. Maybe women are that way because we told them to be that way. So we track them into young adulthood, and we find out that girls who are active casually at young ages have much higher rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide. Why is that? We think it's because we put them in a bind they can't resolve. The culture, the music, the videos, the media, the other kids, and sorry to say this, a lot of us parents encourage this kind of coquettish behavior, seductive stuff. We think it's really cool in these kids. So they get involved sexually, just responding to their culture at an age where they don't have a sexual identity because they're too young. They don't know who they are sexually. They have no idea what this stuff means to them. They're just told to do it. As their sexual identity develops, they feel crummy about who they've been, what they've done. They don't know how to get rid of that. Ergo, depression, anxiety, and suicide. It's different for boys and girls. Ladies, if you were in middle school, you have two choices in terms of your sexual classification. You can be a prude and really ridiculed, or you can be a slut and really ridiculed. There's no middle ground. Boys are cool no matter what they do. So the bind that we put these girls in is unbelievable. That's why we think we see much higher rates of these disorders in the females. So they've got a target on their back, and they don't know how to resolve it. Finally, last piece of bad news in this section about the world is violence. Everybody knows kids are crazy violent, right? We need guards in the schools. You see that thing in Texas where they were going to require, not allow, require classroom teachers to carry sidearms into the classroom? I don't want to get into the gun control thing, but I just, some of the teachers that I met, that's not a good idea. I mean, I was taught by nuns. They nearly beat us to death as it was. Give them sidearms, I probably wouldn't be here today. So, are you kidding me? In any event, so everybody's talking about violence in schools. Schools are amazingly unviolent. This generation of teenagers is amazingly unviolent. We don't know why that is. In light of all the cultural stuff, they don't do stuff. There's Columbine occasions, but they're like airplane crashes. Hardly ever happen. You're safer in the airplane than you are driving home tonight. You all know that, right? Your kid is safer in school than she is in your own basement, statistically speaking. School violence is down 25 to 40%, depending on whose numbers you trust. And it was never that sky high to begin with anyway. Kids are half as murderous as my generation was. Half as murderous. So youth violence is a myth, except for a couple of important exceptions. One, sexual violence is off the charts. Sexual violence against female girls and female adolescents has now hit a point that between familial abuse, which goes on a lot, neighbors abusing girls, and most importantly, and most significantly, dating partners, boys, half of America's teenage girls can expect to have been sexually assaulted before they graduate high school. Half. Everybody got that? And the numbers go up higher. As the girls are sexually active, they become much more prone to sexual abuse by dating partners. It has exploded. While it exploded, guess where the sexual abuse report rates are? Down the drain. 2% is the number I saw. We think it's about 2% of girls who are abused or assaulted reported. They're doing the same old, same old. I guess it was my fault. I brought this on myself. Shame and guilt. It's always the girl's fault. Same old still happening. And you know what the real kicker is, guys? When we interview these girls, the ones who are, party, sex, and all that stuff, even in their language, you see this really painful longing for relationship. Even the girls that are, they have the games who can do most of the boys in 9th grade and all this stuff, and this goes on. When we interview them, we'll interview the boy that she had sex with. We'll say, who did you have sex with? Some girl I knew. We asked that girl, who did you have sex with? She'll say, my boyfriend. And the researchers stop and look up and say, did you say boyfriend? Yeah. You mean the boy you met 5 minutes before the party? Yeah. Yeah. They also found, another piece of research brand new, that half of these girls have a secret longing for a relationship. They say they don't want one, they do. They're not different. They've just been conditioned into getting into conflict with their own values. And that leads us to the final terrible statistic, and it won't get any more depressing than that, and that's suicide. Last year, according to the CDC, hot off the presses, every 5th child in America either attempted suicide, adolescent child, or had a serious plan to suicide. Every 5th kid. Those numbers are staggering. From 1952 to 1992, suicide in the adult population increased 78%, which is of concern. At the same time, suicide among teenagers increased 500%. And it never came down. It went up there and it stayed there. Bounces up and down depending on how well we medicate them, but it essentially stays at that number, 1 in 5. Why is that? We don't know for sure, but guys, after everything I've just told you, think about this for a minute. Take brain-challenged individuals, put them in situations where they have to make very sophisticated decisions about sex and drugs and violence, things that you and I don't do such a good job of making good decisions about, and then have them bear the consequences of that. I think that's why we have extreme rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide. It makes sense to me. Finally, as parents, we ain't doing a good job of responding to this. We're just missing the boat. Because we're all operating on old data. And we're sad. First of all, why are we sad? We're sad because our child died, in a sense. We lost our kid. Your teenager that's giving you trouble now, do you remember that child when she was 4 or 5? Do you remember that angry, scowling, cursing boy when he was 4 or 5? I do. You remember the hugs you used to get? When I would come home from work at night, dealing with some of this stuff, kind of, it's a tough world. Ross, when he was like 3 or 4, he'd come running across the floor, my son. Daddy, 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 remember that? And he'd leap and jump into my arms, and I'd catch him, and he'd give me that hug. Do you remember that hug? God, I remember that hug. It's just all encompassing, unconditional. I can feel it as I talk to him. Oh, it was so healing. I loved that. And I'd sit him on my lap and I'd mess his hair up. You know what else I like doing? I like sniffing the top of his head. Remember that sweet smell you used to have right here? God, I love that. It's an ancient primal bonding thing. See, this is the point of the seminar where the women are all tearing up. And the guys are all shifting uncomfortably in the seat. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't sniff my good or weirdo. Yes, you do, guys. I saw you. Nobody was looking, That sweet little smell right there. I remember that. Well, I love that stuff. I miss my kid. Ross now is 18, and he doesn't come and jump in my arms anymore. I have to go find him, which isn't hard to do because you follow the trail. You all know the trail, right? Tornado went through the house. It always leads to the computer room. And he's in the computer room talking to 17 girls at one time. Interesting, God bless technology. I could have been something in the computer room. So he's talking to all these girls. So I go to him now, and I say, hey Ross, how you doing, man? And he's like, fine, Dad, fine. And I say, how was that project? Social studies, you really worked on that a long time. How did it go? It was fine, Dad. Listen, I'm kind of busy here. Can I catch you later? And I said, sure, son. Catch me later. Little son of a bitch. And I walk away mad. I'm not really mad. I'm sad. I'm a guy, so we don't get sad. We get mad instead of getting sad. Women will just get sad. It's much more time efficient, by the way. You guys should try. Just go get sad. And I know Ross and I actually talked about this because he felt it, and he would watch me walking away saying, what's up with the old man? What's going on? He was thinking, it must be like middle-aged brain changes or something. Somebody should write a book about that. Middle-aged parents are crazy, So, I miss my kid. Don't you miss your kid? I do. I miss the hell out of Ross. I really do, the old Ross. Now he gets really, really mad if I put him on my lap. And you know what else? His head, it doesn't smell so good anymore. This is my kid, won't make this up. What do? You have to acknowledge the grief, guys. You acknowledge the grief. You can do what my wife and I do on occasion, get out all the old pictures and you cry, you know, and then you wipe your tears, turn the page, and get ready for the playoffs. Because now it's real. Now the game is afoot about raising a human being. That pre-adolescent stuff, sorry, they're essentially sort of talented, cute puppies. Adolescence is where the game is, because now they can think, and you know they can think, because they're telling you everything about you and your life and your values is stupid. They're challenging you. Congratulations. That's what they're supposed to do. Now you've got a future adult on your hands. This is the time to do the best parenting and to stay in the game. Too many of us quit. So it's like, well, I guess it's over. He doesn't like me anymore, doesn't think I'm cool, so that's it. Don't pull away because they need you now more than ever before. Second, I said that we were confused. Why are we confused? Because we don't know what to do. We took away the primary tool of parenting kids from forever and teaching kids, and we never put a tool in its place. We never gave parents another option. What was the tool? What was the method we used to use to raise kids back in the day? Yeah, we used to beat the crap out of them. You didn't actually have to beat your kid. You just had to have a kid on the block that got beaten. It established the precedent. It's like, oh, okay, I get this. They can just beat the crap out of me. You know. I'm not kidding. Things were predicated on that element. I can remember the cops bringing my brother home, my older brother, who had been drinking in the dump. We had a great playground. It was the dump. It was the city dump. It was a great playground. He got caught, and the cops held him while my father smacked him around. I have this intense memory. And the cops were nodding approvingly, and then walked away. That was the way it was done. You know, just were the rules of the game. We decided that beating the crap out of kids is not a good idea. But what do you do instead? It's like we went into a peacekeeping mission, you know, back in Bosnia, and we collect all the guys' guns. Give us your guns, give us your ammunition. Okay, keep on keeping your peace. And the sergeant says, Lieutenant Bradley, sir, what do we do if one of the locals takes a shot at us? And we say, we have every confidence in you, Sergeant. Carry on. And walk away. It's really what we did. You know, we didn't offer any training. We didn't say there's other options. So parents are confused. Often it's kind of this typical moment. If you're religious on a Sunday or a Saturday for temple services, your kid turns around and says, I'm not going to your stupid church, and you can't make me. What do you do? What do you do? I know what happens to me. My fist clenches behind my back without me intending to clench the fist because of what my father would have done back in the day, because he was a tough Irish guy. But we never really helped people find another option. And we're kind of stuck in that point in this culture. Most Americans are still in favor of corporal punishment. Most Americans favor spanking or hitting kids. And they also think teachers should be allowed to spank and hit children also. That's why they're not learning in school. We're not hitting them enough. And that's most of us, guys. Most of America. That's where we're at on that particular topic. Question: is fear an effective way to raise kids? Well, to fairly discuss that, I'll quote the most expert person I ever met at fear-based methodology. His name was Peter Joseph Bradley, my father. He was a tough Irishman. He was not a bad man. He used to beat us up a lot. He was not a bad man. He thought it was being a good father. I'm not kidding. He thought that's what was done forever. And this is how you raise tough, autonomous males. You beat the crap out of them. He was doing his job. Well, I'll give you an example of a fear-based interaction. You can tell me if I'm working or not. Circa 1967, I was in my father's basement with my gangster friends, as he lovingly referred to them. And we were listening to the devil's music. Anybody want to guess what the devil's music was? I warn you, it's rarely guessed early on. Who do you think it was? Not the Beatles, not Zappa, not the Stones. Who said the Doors? Would you stand up, please? Come on, stand up. Everybody take a look. Come on. Come on, stand up. I stood up. The Doors. Doors. You were at Woodstock, weren't you? Yeah, okay. Maybe not. Anyway, the Doors. Those of you who are younger are confused because all you hear now of the Doors is little Love Ditty songs, you know, cute little things. They did those to pay for their drugs. That was why they did those. The Doors were a sick bunch of puppets. Seriously, the Doors of Perception. You know, they had, if you want to find out, go get the original albums, the English editions, Great Britain titles, and listen to the lyrics. You will be astounded at what they said. I'm not going to tell you anymore, so get them online somewhere. In any event, we'll listen to the Doors, and my father was very worried about cultural prompts on impressionable teen brains. You know, this really bothered him. So he came down to do an intervention. We were down there. He's got a cigar in his mouth, always had a cigar in his mouth. Comes down the steps, picks up the album. Remember albums? Smashes it. It explodes all over the room like shrapnel. Albums are great for hearing it. Smash, bam! He goes, takes a drag out of his cigar and blows smoke in our wide-eyed faces. And waits to see if any of us are dumb enough to say anything, which we weren't. Then he turns around and he grunts and he walks up the steps cursing and mumbling about, you know, teenagers are stupid and what's wrong with kids today and blah, 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 blah. Question, was that an effective intervention in 1967? You could argue yes. Why? Well, think for a minute. Do you know what an album cost in relative dollar terms? Where we lived, we were, by today's standards, we were poor. Nobody had cars or vacations or, you know, clothes, multiple pairs of shoes. We weren't starving. We didn't know we were poor. But we had no discretionary income, as we like to say. Yeah, it wasn't there. 3 of us chipped in every penny we had earned with our jobs to buy this album. So seeing that thing go up in pieces was really frightening. Nobody else had the album. It was hard to get. And it was not played, those cuts were not played on the radio. They weren't back then. You know why? It used to be this like ridiculous rule about you shouldn't put bizarre stuff on the airwaves. Because kids will listen to it and maybe act it out and stuff like that. Yeah, isn't that a crazy rule in any event? So that was the end of the Doors' influence on me and my gangster friends for quite a while. Why? Guys, 67, you used to be able to police the environment of a child. You could. You could control the environment. There was no craziness, but we had to know somebody who knew somebody. It took a while to get connected with the real crazy stuff. Today, it's in your basement. It's home, working on your child as you're sitting here right now. Guaranteed. It's the music she's listening to, it's things that pop up on the screen, it's watching the kids talk to each other, maybe the movie that she's running, the video, it's all right there. And if you go home, and you find she's listening to a horrible CD, and you take it and break it, which is really hard to do, by the way. Have you tried that? I like lost my mind one night and tried to break a CD as a stick. You can't even break the things, you know. Jeez, not fun anymore. Take out a gun and shoot it. So she's listening to a horrible CD and you take it. What will she do? She'll download that and 2 more that are worse. Just to show you. And you're never going to know. Guys, you are technology immigrants. Your kids are technology natives. You don't know the language. You'll never, ever speak without an accent. It's not going to happen. Give it up. Parents tell me, well, you know, I go through my kids' computers. I have all the filters. I search her room. We have kids that, you know, I say, well, how do you know she's not listening to bad music? Because I check her list. You know, she listens to lots of things. I say, well, like what? Well, it's interesting. She seems to like country and western, a lot of Disney stuff. You know what that is? The kids retitle. You've heard about that? They retitle the song and the artist. So you're spying on the computer, saying, God, this is great. She loves Disney. Isn't that wonderful? Meanwhile, she's got M&M, you know, like going 17 different ways. So that stuff doesn't work. You can't police the environment. You got to switch tactics, guys. That was the last war. This is a new one. What do? I say you have to use respect-based techniques. What's an example of that? Well, circa 2005, my son is in my basement with his gangster friends, listening to his devil's music. How do I know he's listening to devil's music? We have an electrical problem in the house. You may have it too. where we squeak the top step of the basement stairs and it shuts off the CD player in the basement. You notice that? Yeah. I don't know. Come to think of it, it's only when there's a bad CD on. Isn't that interesting? But anyway, so, periodically, and this is good parenting advice, you do some sort of a, search and destroy mission. You swoop in, let them know you're there. So I go to the top of the steps. Sure enough, the CD player shut off. By the way, boys are really lousy at security. Girls, sorry ladies, the girls are really, really good at covering their tracks. They're really amazing. Boys, they're downstairs in the basement going, CD player switches off, we go downstairs, and they're very slick. You would never think they're doing anything wrong. There's this group of boys, and they're going, slick guy. I said, we need to turn the CD player back on. This literally happened word for word. One of the boys says, Mr. Bradley, you don't want to hear this. You're probably right, I don't. However, I need to. I'm not taking your CD. I don't even want to know whose it is. The price you'll pay is we're all going to listen to it together, okay? And they turn and look at each other, turn on a CD player, and there's an artist who was saying some very interesting things about women and sex. I'll just let that go. So we got to the really interesting part, which was that you should, it's something I missed in the literature all these years, that women like to get beaten up. I didn't know that, you know. Nobody ever told my poor wife, I haven't beaten her in 30 years. It's amazing. Make a note, go home and beat up wife. Oh, that'll work out real good. Yeah, the artist was telling me that women really feel loved if you beat them up. Didn't know that. And the instructions were you should beat them up every few days. You gotta slap them around. The refrain, you may know the song, the refrain part, and there's 3 of them now, 2 or 3, that advocate this, and one of them, the refrain is, I always boot this, if you know better than me, tell me, but it's something like, she screams and she squeals, she pleads and she begs, but she loves it, she loves it, she loves it. Let's turn off the CD player. I said, guys, do you think women really like to get beaten up? And they're like, who cares? Nobody listens to that stuff. And I said, really? You don't think the kids listen to the lyrics? Nah, nobody listens to the lyrics. So, well, it's interesting. Do you think that if they did listen to the lyrics, that maybe the lyrics are affecting their behavior? Lyrics don't make anybody do nothing. It's real. I'll be right back. And I run upstairs, and I come down with a graph I use in a class I teach. And look at this. As we looked at, cigarette smoking, that kids who see a lot of on-screen smoking, they see that, and it looks like smoked cigarettes, just seeing that. Yeah, well, maybe that's what they see, but, it's lyrics don't make anybody do anything. Really, I'll be right back. And I come down with another chart that I happen to have. You should write me, I'll send you copies. Look at this, guys, as these sexually violent lyrics that you do know, there's sexual lyrics and then there's sexually violent lyrics, which are always degrading to women. Look at this. Here's the line for the lyrics, and look at the line of sexual assault against adolescent females by their dating partners. Almost exactly linear correlated, just exactly. So doesn't that suggest that maybe words, lyrics, make kids act this stuff out? Ross hates it when I do this stuff. He used to get really mad. One time he said, "You're just messing with our minds," which is a great phrase, messing with our minds. One time he said, "Why don't you just punch me in the face and get it over with?" He was like 13. I said, "Ross, I would love to punch you in the face and get it over." And that happens to be the God's honest truth. It's like real manly and ex-military. And I get back to my football game a heck of a lot faster. And I said that to the boys. I said, and you know something? The only thing that would change is to embarrass and humiliate my son in front of his friends, and I would push him in the direction of that crazy person on the CD player. By going King Kong, by getting rageful and being the tough guy, I would actually lose the war. I might win the battle, and I'll lose the war, because my son will have good reasons to hate me and good reasons to follow this lunatic and this crazy stuff that he hears in the culture. Gentlemen, I said to the boys, I can't control what you see and hear. Lesson number 1 in the Army, don't start fights you can't win. Don't do that. I said to the boys, I can't control what you see and what you hear. I wish I could. I really do. But I can't. White flag, not going to start that fight. No hope we'll win in that one. I give up. Gentlemen, I said to the boys, I care about what you think, about what you see, and what you hear. That's the game that I play. And on that note, I've invited Ross's mom to come down to join us to talk about whether women really like being slapped around. Yeah. What am I going after? I can't control them. I really can't. And you can't control your kids, guys. Not when they're an adolescent. No, they're going to make choices. You really can't. You have to do the best you can. So what do? You go after their belief system. You do the best you can with rules. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the goal is their belief system. Think for a minute. At the weird, wild beer party in the park, in the middle of the night, who's the safe kid? The kid who says, oh, I can't drink, the old man will kill me. It's not a safe kid. You guys had old men that would kill you, right? That becomes a game of how do I drink and my father doesn't find out. You played that game, right? It's an easy game, easily done. The safe kid is the one who says, no, I don't drink, thanks. How do you get to that? That's safety, that's gold. That's a kid whose belief system has been attacked by a smart parent, by another culture, a subculture, parents, teachers, a community that tries to talk to the kids in ways that they think about what's going on in their culture and make decisions at early ages because we can't afford to wait anymore. We can't afford to wait because the culture is not going to wait. Your enemy is not sleeping. It's coming after your child at very early ages. That's respect-based. Respect-based requires a couple of things that are very difficult. One, it requires, here's where the dads get mad, that we earn the respect of our children. Your parents didn't have to do that. See, respect, the whole definition has changed. It used to be, you will respect me, goddammit. Remember that? You will respect me or else. And all you had to do is have the kid get beaten down the street. It's like, okay, I get this picture. Yeah. Respect today, kids define as an upward-looking admiration, a wanting to be like somebody, seeing a grown-up, a true grown-up, not an adult, but a grown-up who has something the kid doesn't have, that the kid wants to be like. So we ask kids, well, first tell us about adults you don't respect. And you know who they describe? If you think of a parenting continuum from 0 to 10 in terms of parenting styles, the 10 is a Marine Corps drill sergeant, smacking them around, screaming, yelling, searching their rooms, humiliating them. And the 0 is the laissez-faire parent, does whatever, the kid can do whatever he wants. He's the parent who's cool, sets up the beer kegs, don't tell your parents. Because I'm a cool parent, I understand. Kids do not respect either the 0 or the 10. They recognize those are both other adolescents. You've got one who's out of control, he's crazy because he doesn't know what to do. And then you've got the 0 who's trying to be a teenager himself. Kids will go for the beer, unfortunately, but they won't respect that grown-up. Who do they respect? We asked them. They said, well, adults who don't yell and scream, who don't hit. Adults who, if they do yell and lose their temper, they apologize. And say, just because the kid snapped out does not grant the adult permission to snap out. They're impressed like crazy with that. They're impressed by adults who have a set of values that are important to them. The adults who walk the walk, not just talk the talk. They don't preach the values, and they're not Sunday morning churchgoers. They walk a set of values, whether they're religious or not, every day. And they show the values to the kids, not yell them to the kids, but show them. These are important things that I've discovered that are important to me, and this is why. The tragedy is, most kids in America can't tell us what the parents' values are. They can't identify. When we ask them questions, how does your parent feel about X, Y, or Z? They don't really know, because we think they don't care about what our values are, because they make fun of you, because they think you're stupid and you're a dinosaur and you don't understand. It turns out, guys, they are listening, and they're looking for people to help them make sense of the world. They need the parenting, but they also need a connection with you as the parents. And you're saying, well, great, how do I connect with a kid that doesn't want to be seen within 10 feet of me in the shopping mall? You have to change up the strategy and tactics, and we'll go over some specific recommendations in a minute. So that's what respect-based requires. Did I say there was any good news? You know, a little good news? The first is the brain, guys. That brain is a miracle. Your kid is growing up in front of you at an accelerated rate. The changes are like this. They flash by. And this is where the kid is really open to learning important stuff. They're now able to really understand these things that are really critical to them being happy, successful adults. Finally, second, guess what the most influential aspect of a teenager's life is? Would you say it's the peers, the media, the music? What would you guess? What has more power over a teen than anything else? The parents. The parents. Do you believe that? Some days I do. A lot of days I don't. Saying there's just no way. But the research is really clear. Overwhelmingly, your kids already respect and admire who you are. Already. 80% of America's teenagers say they do respect their parents. We ask the parents, do you think your kid respects you? 40% say yes. 60% say no way. Why is that? Because kids don't come and jump in your arms and tell you how wonderful you are when they're teenagers. That all ends. They show it in different ways, in subtle ways. But you have the wild cards. You've got the ace in the hole over what kind of an adult your child is going to turn out to be if you handle this correctly in adolescence. Third piece of bad news, good news rather, do not fear. Sorry, I scared you, didn't I? I want to see if you're awake. Third piece of good news, don't fear conflict. Don't fear conflict. Parents get traumatized because their kids are suddenly conflicting with them on stuff, and they think they're losing their kid. Conflict to a child feels like love if it's done in the appropriate dose and the appropriate term. Conflict as in, sorry you can't go to beer parties. What's an example? Mom came into my office, dragged her daughter in. Actually, the daughter was willing to come in because she was convinced I'd be on her side, daughter's side. Daughter was 14, mom was recently separated. The older kids all went with dad because he has no rules. Mom has rules, so the older kids hate mom. 14-year-old stays with mom. She got this picture, this woman's extremely vulnerable, right? Terrible time, lost her family. Brings in the 14-year-old, why? They're having terrible fights because the 14-year-old wants to go on a trip to Cancun, unsupervised, with a bunch of 14, 15, and 16-year-old kids on spring break. You laugh. You should see the numbers of kids who are permitted to go. In a group of 8 families, 5 families gave permission for this whatever you want to call it, bizarre. Seriously, they did. This is true. Dad, sweet guy that he is, wrote the check for the 14-year-old, handed it to her and said, if mom says it's okay, you can go. All's fair and non-love and war, I guess. Yeah, how about that? So the girl's up in that, she's screaming at mom, first she's pleading, you have to let me go. Everybody's going, if I don't go, my life will be over, it'll be ruined. You know, right? You know, on and on and on. And mom's looking at me for help. And I'm just shrugging my shoulders, because I got enough problems of my own. It's your kid, I don't care. You want me to decide? Okay, you can go to Cancun. Send me a postcard. Thanks for coming by. You know, no, seriously, it's your kid. You have to make a call. Mom's giving me that look, like, what am I paying you all this money for? Which is a good question, by the way. We'll leave that where it is. But in any event, so mom says to the daughter, I can't do this, sweetie. I just can't. This is dangerous. The girl screams. She gets up and screams at her mom. If you don't let me go, she's in her face over the coffee table, I'll never speak to you again, and you'll never see your grandchildren. Remember I said girls are smarter than boys? I was like, listen, honey, would you sign this? Can I get your autograph? Because that was really well done, you know? You sized up this poor woman, you know, saw the emotional scars and just went right in there and you know, more loss of family and stuff like that. It was amazing. So mom, you know, like, in my head I'm going, don't give in, don't give in, don't give in. And mom takes a breath and says, I can't do this one. I can do the purple hair. You know, I won't bug you about the messy room. But honey, this could kill you. I can't go there with this one. I love you too much. The girl screams that scream that girls can do that when it punctures your eardrums, kicks over the coffee table, my candy was flying all over the place, goes out the door screaming like a banshee and slams my door so hard the wall clock comes down, shatters on the floor. It's like a movie scene. It was great. It's nighttime, she's out in the parking lot, shrieking as loud as she can, cursing and just foaming at the mouth. And Mom starts to cry. She says, see, you know, I'm losing my last child here. I'm losing my daughter. I said, no, you're not. You're gaining your daughter. She's a banana out in the parking lot because she knows you're right. She's not stupid, and she knows your husband, sweet guy that he is, set you up with this. She understands what love is. She's in a terrible bind, and what you're seeing is her terrible bind. Because part of her brain is saying, Mom's the only one that really loves me here, and she's right, and the other part says, I really, really, really want to go to Cancun, and she can't resolve it. Guys, conflict, when it's done with love, when it's done calmly, appropriately, with a good reason, without screaming and yelling and raging, feels like love to the child. They know that. We study kids who have no limits. They become rageful and depressed. Kids that get everything they want, you're going to have that other seminar coming in, you should go. You know, they don't feel secure. Kids need fences to feel secure. They orient themselves off those fences and they calm down. Will they thank you for that? When you tell your daughter that she can't go to the beer party in the park, does she say, oh, thank you, mother dearest? How did I ever get so lucky to have such a wise and no! She'll scream and threaten that you'll never see your grandchildren and slam doors and stomp up the steps. That's what she's supposed to do. It's okay. Guys, do you remember childbirth? Ladies, and please don't give me that line about, oh, it was a sweet romantic adventure. No, it wasn't. I was there. It was scary, you know. It was like painful and frightening. There was machines I didn't understand. Ross was messing with me even then. He was like 30 hours labor and fetal distress stuff. So, you know, fetal distress, you wire them up to the machine, and if the numbers go down, they rush in. It's an emergency. Well, you know, his numbers kept dipping. I'd go screaming out to the hall, fetal distress, and the staff would come running in, numbers were fine. I woke up the obstetrician twice. She herself was 8 months pregnant. This poor obstetrician, she was huge. She must have had like 3 hours of sleep in 2 days. You know, and the staff would all look at me like, oh, shrinks, oh my God, we were all crazy. Dr. Bradley, here's how the numbers work. See, if the numbers are here, they're fine. The numbers are here. See, this is a happy face, and this is an unhappy face. Smiley face, it's okay, don't wake me up again. And then she would storm off. Well, what was happening, Ross had his hand on his cord, the umbilical cord, and I know he was looking out, saying, let's see, did everybody get out except one? It's true. In any event, it was not sweet and romantic, it was hard, it was scary, there was yelling, there was some bloodshed, and it was also the most unbelievable miracle. I mean, it never gets more real than that, right? It's like incredible, like it's a showstopper, like, you know, I could die now, I've seen it, it's just unbelievable to see the birth of a child. Here you are again. This is the rebirth of your child. In infancy, at birth, the child broke from you physically to become autonomous. Now they're breaking from you emotionally, psychologically. They're becoming autonomous again. They're like breathing on their own, becoming a true adult, autonomous human being. But it ain't a sweet romantic adventure. There's yelling involved. There's some pain, sometimes some bloodshed. It can get tough, but it's another miracle of nature. Stop fearing conflict. Just keep it in the right dose, the right tone, and you'll be fine. It actually is centering for the kid. Okay? With that, I want to hit a couple of commandments. As usual, I spoke too much, and we'll get to your Q&A. First commandment I want to go over. You have that handout there, the 10 Commandments of Parenting Adolescents. Anybody need one? Oh, we got a lot of folks that don't have the handout. Do we have some? Oh, here we come. Oh, great. Perfect timing. Look at those two.
It was the early discussion people.
The early discussion people got it. See, that's what you get for coming early, you know? That'll teach you. Jeez, why can't you come late like everybody else? Yeah. Okay. First commandment. First commandment. Thou shalt be as a dispassionate cop unto the child in adolescence. We have some more over here, folks. We got a. And you all can listen, and again, you're going to be getting a written outline of this too. So, dispassionate cop. What's that about? Do you ever get a ticket from an angry cop? The scary guys? Chicago used to be famous for them, I understand, right? Well, Philadelphia, we're winning the World Series. We won the World Series of crazy cops too. Back in the day, we really had it crew. And some of them are still around, but you may have run into one of them. You get a ticket for going through a stop sign, and the guy makes you feel afraid, maybe spotlight on your face. That was always a favorite of mine. Hand on gun. Down south, I got stopped. Recently, I was going through Tennessee on the back roads, dumb idea, see what the country looks like, stuff. And I got pulled over by this guy, and he comes up and he's got the cowboy hat. He's got mirrored sunglasses, Arnold Schwarzenegger sunglasses. He's got every weapon you could fit on belts. I mean, this guy, and he's got about 4,000 rounds of ammunition strapped on him. And I'm looking at this, it's like they're going to drop him into Afghanistan or something. And so he comes up, I roll down the window, I'm not a threatening guy, and he said, I'm sorry, officer, I guess I was speeding. I don't even know what the speed limit is here in Tennessee. What is the speed limit? You know what he said? Nothing. He was stock still. One of these things, hands on hips, seeing all his weapons and stuff. And then after 28 seconds, because I'm gauging this, because I observed human behavior, I say, how long is he going to go? 28 seconds. He does a hip shift, creaking all the weaponry, the leather creaking, gun belts. Seriously, I'm like, wow, you're amazing, man. I think I saw this in a movie. Wasn't that Paul Newman? Was that What was he doing? His belief is you scare people, you terrify them to get them to slow down, I guess. So the cop, an angry cop gives you a ticket for the stop sign, throws a ticket in the window. Yeah, I guess your gas pedal up, right, lady? And he stomps away after having scared you. Who are you angry at as the cop storms away? The cop. You got his number, you're going to write a letter of complaint, right? And if you came to the same stop sign the next day and the same cop is sitting there with the mirrored sunglasses staring at you, wouldn't you have an insane urge to maybe drift through the stop sign a little bit? No? You're not Irish after all. Sure you would. You'd be like, yeah, tough guy, you got a gun, You'd be angry at the cop. Second cop gives you a ticket. We call this guy the dispassionate cop. He gives you the same ticket for the same offense, but he gives it to you a little bit differently. He comes up and says, Miss Jones, I can see by your bumper sticker that you're a teacher at the school, so I know you're late. Miss Jones, better to get there late than not at all. I'll get you out of here as soon as I can. He comes back and says, take a right on Elm, go to Maple, you'll pick up a couple of minutes, but Miss Jones, once every 2 months I get to pick up body parts at this intersection. I'd rather not be picking up yours. You can't go through stop signs. It's really dangerous. Here's your ticket. Hope the rest of your day is better than this. Walks away. Who are you mad at now? Everybody got that? If you remember one other thing tonight, remember, the whole point is to get a kid mad at herself for what happened, not mad at you. This is the difference between punishments and consequences. Think about it. What would a punishment be? The cop follows you home, says, okay, we're going back home, and he sets you up in front of your family and said, she went through a stop sign. Can you believe that? I'm taking your big screen TV and give me that cell phone, young lady, and you're in for a month. That'll teach you not to go through the stop sign. How would you feel? Would there be revolution in the streets? Yes. Why? He made it all up. And he got to just download all his anger on you and all his aggression and control needs. Isn't that exactly what we do to our children? Isn't that exactly what we do to our kids? They screw up, they make a mistake, and we start issuing punishments. You're grounded for the next 17 and a half years, and all this crazy stuff we never stick to anyway. We always roll it back, and then we wonder why kids don't listen to us when we try to impose consequences. What is a consequence? It's a pre-agreed outcome of an action. The deal is you put the power in your kid's hands. What's an example? Your kid comes home having had a few beers. First, be sure they didn't have a lot of beers. One of the new twists is kids are stealing their little brother's Ritalin, their psychostimulants for ADHD, and they take a bunch of these stimulants so they can drink more. And they drink huge amounts, and they can kind of maintain themselves because they're also being amped up by the methamphetamine. Then the meth wears off, they crash and they're in alcohol toxicity. So be careful, be very careful about a kid who's been drinking. In any event, what do? First thing you do is nothing. Do not parent at 2 a.m. in the morning. You say to your kid, I know you're drinking, we'll talk tomorrow. It's a good reason to do that. One is you'll be much smarter tomorrow than in your current state. And second, your kid will lie in bed all night saying, what the hell is he going to say tomorrow? So the anxiety works to your benefit. When, first offense, what do? You say to your kid, tell me what you learned. Tell me what you learned. Why do you do that? Because you might strike gold. You might have a kid, it happens more often than you would think, but the kid says, you know something? It was stupid. The stuff tastes awful. It was crazy. It was cold. Kids got sick. They were puking. Johnny jumped on Sally and tried to rape her, and we had to pull him off. It was bizarre that, the whole thing is like really stupid. Why would you lump a punishment on top of that? Why would you lump a punishment on top of that? If the kid got the point, congratulate yourself. Then you set up a consequence for the next event. Say to your kid, well, son, what if this happens again? I'll never do it again, Dad. Well, it's cool, like here and now, but what if it does happen? Can we agree that you're not ready for the level of freedom of being out on these sleepovers because you made bad choices? You mean I can't ever have a sleepover? Not at all. You can have sleepovers at our house anytime you want. And in a couple of months, you can go to sleepovers elsewhere because I know you're smart and you're going to get this and you're going to make better decisions. But right now, you're making bad decisions. So we're going to have to roll that in a little bit. Okay? So the next time he drinks, if it happens, he lets himself down. And you can be the dispassionate cop. Sorry, son. It's the way sleepovers are done for a couple of months. But you'll get it. You'll figure it. You mean you're grounding me? No. Remember we talked about it. In fact, we wrote it down. Remember? Got a copy here. Write it down. So the kid is mad at himself. Everybody got the drift of that? So it's about getting kids angry at themselves because the power was in their hands to make a good decision or a bad decision, and they get to live with it either way. Second point I want to hit is thou shalt not shout. Parenting rules. Commandment 3. Parenting speaking rules. We do a lousy job of communicating with teenagers, guys. Lousy job. Why? Well, we don't really understand how it works for them in communication. What's a terrible time of day to talk to a teenager? Morning. They can barely breathe, let alone talk. Leave them alone. Another bad time is after school. They're sick to death of adult demands. What's a good time of day to talk to a teenager? Midnight. I'm not joking. Midnight. Mike Riera said, the psychologist author, set your alarm clock for midnight. It's true. Your kid is awake. They have a hard time sleeping. The world's going to sleep. They're so desperate for human interaction, they'll even talk to you. It's true. It really works. When you do go in and talk to them, be sure you talk properly. Understand the teen culture. Ladies, don't do that thing you guys do where you search their souls with your eyes. Women are like, yeah, have you noticed that, guys? Women are weird. They're not hitting on you. They just, they try to see who you are through your eyes. Weird. You got to talk to boys. Alice said boys like men talk to men. We don't gaze into each other's eyes. We kind of sideways. Yeah, hell of a game. Just, kind of non-threatening sorts of stuff. If it's a boy, sit next to him or lie next to him on the bed. Do not go face to face. It just ties him up in knots. In particular, girls can do more of that, not the boys. Lie on the bed, throw a ball up in the air. Frame questions. Do not use the question we all use, how was your day? Makes them insane. What a stupid question, How was my day? It was 500 things, I don't know what the hell she's talking about. So frame the question. What I mean by that is, say, tell me something that was good that happened to you today. Tell me something that sucked that happened to you today. And they can, okay, and get through their brain and figure out something to share with you, maybe. Another point is, ladies, nothing personal, but you talk too much. You'll say the same thing over and over and over and over, and when he doesn't respond, you'll say it sideways and in Portuguese, and then you get right. Surprise! Message from mom, don't do drugs, smiley face, love you, I had a boy one time. had a boy one time that said, my mother opens her mouth to draw a breath and my blood runs cold. Because I know I've heard this 10,000 times, I'm going to scream and she's going to get mad at me. You know, when kids do hear you, they don't say, oh, thank you, Father dearest, that was an amazing piece of insight for me. If they just look away and stare, they've heard you. It's done. Don't look. You know how we talk to people from other countries? They don't understand us, so we yell at them. Say the same thing louder, and then it's like that with teenagers. Ladies, do you know how many words in a row an adolescent male can pay full attention to at age 12, 13? 5 to 7. How many words do you use in a conversation with him? Really? He's glazed over. He's gone. So, dads, what do we do? Nothing. It's mom's job to handle all the crap in the family, right? Isn't that amazing the way that works? See, I have one of those liberated marriages too. We're equal partners. All the crap still flows into the kitchen where mom is. You know, it's really fun. Ross came to me one time, I'm watching the game, he said, Dad, listen, don't get mad, but can I, never mind, I'll ask Mom. You're a good boy, son. She's in the kitchen. And so as the fight's brewing in the kitchen, what do? We turn up the volume to the TV set, right? Oh, geez, until we max out that green bar and you can't hear it anymore. And then we did that age-old father intervention. We go crazy. Jeepers, creepers, get out there right now! And chase people around the house screaming and yelling. Thanks a lot, Dad. Mom couldn't have gone insane all by herself. To go crazy. If we took the stereotypical mother and father there and rolled them into one, we'd have it. Don't repeat yourself. Say things softly. The quieter you talk, the quieter everybody else will get because they want to hear what you're saying. It works with teenagers. You can control their behavior by modeling what you want to see. The louder they get and the more they gesture, you get calmer. Calmer. We train cops and mental health workers. Get calmer. Stoop your let your shoulders go down, hands in pockets, look at the floor, don't go nose to nose. This stuff really works when you've got a kid who's raging. So use those style things. There's other tricks you can use, a couple of tricks, and then we'll get to the Q&A. One is, when you're going through a bad time with the teen, don't go frontal assault. Go sideways, end run, outflank. What's an example? Ross was really mad at me, relationship was really bad for a while, everything was blowing up. So I finally went in, said, tell you what, son, how about if you and I go get a coffee? How about that? And he said, like, no. I remember this so clear, and I said, like, why? And he says, like, somebody might see me there with you. I said, oh, look, son, tell you what, I'll give you $5 to go get a coffee with me. He looked at me and he said, $5? I said, yeah. He says, cash? I said, yeah. He says, up front? I said, yeah. You're going to give me $5, I can say anything I want, and I keep the $5. I said, that's the deal. He says, okay. He takes the $5 and walks out of the house like this. Showing everybody how I got over on the old man. 20 minutes later, we're at the coffee shop, and he's chatting away. Get kids in different places, they'll talk different. If you're fighting in the kitchen, don't talk in the kitchen, find some other place. A space that works well is cars. They'll talk in cars if you can get the earplugs out of their ears. Put them in the back seat with other kids, you're going to hear more about what's going on than you want to know. They just chat and run on and on and on like that. Moms passed on other suggestions. We had a mom was saying that her daughter didn't talk to her for a week. Girls can do that. Girls can actually, it is frightening. Girls are like way too strong. Women in general are, but in any event. So they can shut up for a week and punish you with a stony silence. Boys can't pull that off, typically. But in any event, so mom said she had it. This came from an audience member. She filled 2 water pistols, put them on a silver tray, and took them into her daughter's room. Daughter said, what's that? She said, pick your weapon. Daughter said, get out of here. You're stupid, Mom. And the mom said, oh, okay. Picked up the gun and started to squirt the kid in the head. The kid picks up the other gun and starts to squirt Mom back. Next thing you know, they're chasing each other around the house, laughing and squirting each other and remembering that they love each other. Guys, the human brain cannot be rage-driven and joy-driven at the same time. It makes a choice. And if you do these surprises, these end runs, ridiculous things, you can sometimes break that ice that's going on. So look for creative ways to connect with a kid. The secret is they want you to, they just can't tell you that. And don't quit selling. Keep going back and knocking on the door. You know, I got a hug for you, son. Oh, get away, Mom. That's stupid. Yeah, I know you don't do that anymore. I just want you to know. Because guys, when you stop selling, even though they keep rejecting, they get sad. They tell me how sad they get because their parents quit on them. I'm going to say the last commandment to the end. Let's get to a couple of Q and A's, quarrels and arguments. And I'll ask you to speak loud if you can so everybody can hear. Yes, ma'am.
My daughter's 12. We've tried if you, before school started, you don't do your homework, we will ground you. Take away certain privileges. Kids agreed to it. My daughter didn't do her homework, so privileges were taken away. This evening, she's rationalizing with me, giving me excuses, telling me how by taking these privileges away, it's making her depressed, which is making her more anxious, which is making her more depressed. And this whole vicious cycle, if she doesn't get to be with her friends. And I said, but we agreed to this. And she said, but it's making me depressed. You don't want me depressed, do you?
Can I say something about girls are smarter than boys? Boys would never think about that. So what do? The first thing you do is don't do takeaways. Takeaways don't work. Because what boys will do is they'll get into wars of attrition. And some girls will too. I don't care about that. I don't care. So you can take away the cell phone, take away the computer, and they're like terrorists. They'll die to make a point. Seriously. I mean, that's what are you going to do next? You roll up the carpets? Take up the floorboards? All she has is joists, you know? Seriously, parents tell me that. They come in to see me, the kid's falling into the basement through the floor, and then I have a door. Parents often take the doors off the hinges and all that stuff. So that's a war of attrition. They will win, you will lose. It doesn't work. They just dig in, dig in, dig in. They're willing to die to make a point. So you don't fight them the way you would a normal person. So what is it that you do? Instead of having takeaways, you set her up for failure to earn. So you say, well, honey, what do you want? What do you want in the world? What's important to you? Get her a list. Say, well, what we would like is to see you doing homework. Be careful about insisting on grades versus insisting on effort. Wherever you can, go for the effort. Because the grades, first of all, we don't have time to do it. Grades really don't matter in high school, guys. I hate to disappoint you. Effort matters. If a kid is willing to put in effort, you want to get them into confronting that. So you pay for effort. And in essence, you could say it's bribing her, but you put it on her in a way that works. You don't go for a semester's worth of effort. You go for like a day at a time or a week at a time. Most schools have computer systems. You can log on and see if they got the homework done. And you work out a system. Honey, for every homework that's done, you learn X. And if you've done everything that week, you get X plus a bonus of 20% of whatever it is you want. So tell us what you want. She'll blow it off. Well, I don't care. I said, well, think about it and let us know. Because we're not real happy with the system, and clearly you're getting depressed and anxious. We hear that. So we'd like to have another way. And you can earn your way in the world. Instead of getting a part-time job, you can do your homework and get money, get privileges. How's that for a cool idea? So you put it back on her. Guys, be careful about going to war over grades. It just isn't worthwhile. Grades are in a basket, a secondary priority. We'll talk about that when I'm wrapping up the end. But focus more on things like effort, on character, those issues. That's what you're trying to get out of homework. Yes, sir?
What advice can you give us for those who have more than one adolescent in the house and they're going at it because of whatever's going on in their head, and we try to get in the middle of that or try to resolve that? Any advice you can give would be appreciated.
What do you do with sibling rivalry and sibling conflict? Look at some glad you came tonight. I have the absolute answer to sibling rivalry. All you have to do is space out their ages by at least 5 years. Any other questions? Yes, you should have talked to me first. Yeah, the answer is there's not a heck of a lot you can do. The fact is they're going to fight, and some research says they learn a lot in the conflict. As long as no one is actually getting bloodied, demolished, they learn an awful lot. It seems to be nature's way. As he said, if I get in the middle of it, it doesn't seem to help. It makes it worse. You know, it's like going into a bar fight and saying, you know, cops don't go in there and say, gee, did he say bad words to you? You shouldn't say that. They arrest everybody and they say, you know, you're going downtown. So the drill is to stay out of it as much as you can.
So they don't really hate each other, that's good.
They actually typically don't, but if parents get involved, they can start to, because we often make the mistake of thinking one is more at fault than the other. Often it's boy-girl. You know that older boy that smacked your daughter, and you went crazy, how dare you hit a girl? Can't believe you did that. In the families where we have the videotapes, if we study this, you know what we often usually see? For the preceding week, that younger girl was following the older boy, torturing the hell out of him. Oh, you got a girlfriend? I'm gonna tell. And then go, yeah. You know, like a week's worth of this. Finally, she crosses the line. He turns around and smacks her. She goes off like somebody poleaxed her, shrieking and screaming. You know, Daddy, he's hitting me! And Dad rushes in. How could you hit a girl? What the hell is wrong with you? And that's when the rivalry can become deadly. Because the kid, the boy is saying, I'm losing my father because she's such a manipulative and she's really good at it. So getting involved in the middle of it typically doesn't work. Triangulates and makes it worse. What can you do? One, you do the coffee shop, guys. It really breaks my heart to hear you fighting like this. Two, you can try bribing them. You put them on a contract. Every morning, every AM period, every PM period, you guys get through without a knockdown, drag out. I'll give each of you X. You do 2 phases, because if they have a fight in the morning, you don't want them having nothing to live for the rest of the day. So you give them, they earn money or privileges doing that. But you say to them, the bad news is, guys, you're going to, this is an Army concept, there's no individuals, it's just the team. You're going to win or lose as a team. If there is a fight, I'm not asking who did what to whom. You both win and you both lose. So good luck. Hope this works out. So you put it back on them. That'll work about 55%. It'll reduce the conflict, it won't make it go away. And that's as good as it gets. But you stay impartial. When they start to tell you, he did this, you shrug your shoulders. Sorry, I wasn't there. You guys are going to have to work it out. And my final recommendation is noise-canceling headphones. They work real well. If you can't hear the screaming and yelling, it doesn't get you nearly as upset. And I think I've got to wrap up. Am I getting the cue?
Well, yeah, what?
One more?
You could take 2 more.
2 more? Oh, right. Thank you, Billy. Yes, sir.
You said you've got 1 in 4 that is some form of drug abuse, 1 in 3 sexually active. So some parents test for drugs at home. Where's your feeling on that? What do we do about testing for sexually transmitted diseases?
Yeah. Let me broaden the question. First of all, with girls and boys who might be sexually active, send them in to see the pediatrician alone. Do not insist on knowing what's going on. Tell the pediatrician you want to have them talk to them about risk. And again, they might be comfortable talking to the ped or the GP, whatever you're seeing, and then getting tests and getting treatment if they need it. So let me broaden the issue a little bit, because it has to do with privacy and trust issues. Parents say, should I spy on my kid? Do I go through the emails and all that sort of stuff, search the room? Should I do drug tests on my kid? The answer is you got to use a policy like the cops. You have to have probable cause. If your kid has done drugs and you found repeated instances of doing drugs, then I am an advocate of saying you have a temporary contract where you do drug testing. You say, son, as soon as you get a clean clean urine test, you earn blank. If you don't, then you don't get the thing, the freedom to be outside where you're making bad decisions, stuff like that. Not grounding, just trying to protect you. And you always say, I love you, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to keep you alive and out of prison until you're like 18. Wouldn't that be cool? So that's the mantra that you're doing. Do you drug test a kid who's not doing anything bad? Do you search the room of a child who's doing fine in the world? I say no. I know you've got experts that come in and say, absolutely, you should spy on your kid. I think that's a disaster. Think about it for a minute, guys. If you're in a marriage, a relationship, and you're faithful, and you're a good person, and you think things are really good, you're doing your job, and you find out your spouse hired a private detective, how would you feel? Would that feel kind of crummy to you? You find out they're reading your emails without you knowing, putting spyware in the car or whatever? Yeah, it feels like a betrayal to a kid who's doing a good job. and it's a diminishing return. That makes the crazy behavior look more attractive. Do you understand? You've got gold, you didn't know you had it, and you can ruin it by getting crazy with control. Be sure it's probable cause. Be sure you've got a good reason before you sign. Final question? Yes, sir.
I just want to let you know it's 1-1 at the end of the fifth.
Okay, I gotta go. You should not joke. Well, on that note, I'm going to wrap up. Last commandment. This too shall pass. Guys, when you're in a tough time with an adolescent, it feels like it's forever. And everybody gets so despondent and downtrodden, they just get hopeless and the morale goes down. This is a phase. Remember toilet training? Wasn't that a fun time? It passes. It goes into the bad memory bank in your head. But because things are bad does not mean they're going to be bad forever. You just need to keep the few cardinal rules in mind. What are the cardinal rules? 1, pick your battles. Think about stuff that goes on with your kid as being 3 levels of priority. 3 baskets. Priority 3, 2, and 1. One of the critical ones. What's in basket 3? Clothes, hairstyles, messy rooms. You do what you can, offer incentives. You don't go to war over stuff in that basket. Because there's lots of safety nets for that. What's in basket 2? Grades. Parents hate hearing that. Don't go to war over grades. Do the best you can, offer incentives, but a lot of kids are just not built to do school. That kicks in later in life. I got a letter from a girl named Becky who's brilliant. Mother was a physician, father was a lawyer. She was smarter than they were and got C's, once in a while B, occasional D. Nice kid, sweet kid. Did all sorts of wonderful things, community service, just didn't really care about school. Years and years later, I heard she had gone off to community college. I got a ha-ha letter from Becky. Dear Dr. Bradley, this is Becky. Remember me? Guess from where I just graduated? NYU. Ha ha ha. You never would have thought. NYU, very fine institution. She went to community college. She learned how to study and parlayed that in NYU. I don't think you could do that. She did. Doing great. Moved on into graduate school. So you don't go crazy. That's, there's safety nets for those 2 baskets, 2 and 3. Things that can kind of pull it together later in life. What's in basket number 1? The heart of your child. The character. The values. That's the sex, drugs, and violence stuff. And there you do draw lines in the sand, and you do say, sorry, there's 0 tolerance here. This cannot happen. You do it calmly, you do it with love, you always say, because I love you, I'm worried about you. But that's where you do appear to be willing to go to war, saying it's simply not acceptable. We can't have this. Focus on what your true mission is. What's your mission? Not to raise a future Ivy League student. Guys, Ivy League is wildly overrated. Undergraduate programs are wildly overrated. Your job is to raise the parent of your grandchildren, the grandparent of your great-grandchildren. What do you want to pass down? What do you want to teach this kid for the essentially 4 years you've got, 14 to 18, to really shape this adult? You want to teach screaming, yelling, fighting, distrust, spying? Is that what you want to pass down? Or do you want to teach tolerance, patience, love, compassion, values, character? This is touching the face of infinity. This is as close as we get. What do you want to bequeath to the next set of generations coming after you? Think about that. I think about that all the time. It sobers me up when I'm about to go crazy because the room is a mess. One of the tricks I use is I think about being on my deathbed. Real cheery thought. I know my kids think about it all the time. And I think to myself, how am I going to feel then about what I'm about to do tonight? And I get real calm about the bad grade, about the messy room. So use tricks like that to help yourself stay calm, stay focused on what's critical, the heart of your child. And almost always it works out fine. Remember I said at 13 a switch flips and they get like nuts? Well, veteran parents, you've seen it. 16, 17, 18, that switch flips back. It's really weird. Come down to the breakfast table, and the kid that used to grumble and curse and wouldn't talk to you in the morning, he's sitting there and he's smiling. And you wonder what drugs he's doing now. And he says, Mom, can I get you a cup of tea? Because nothing personal, but it looks like you aged a whole lot in the past 5 years. What happened, Mom? Good luck out there, guys. Thank you so much for coming.